The rain fell mercilessly from the darkened sky, each drop like a needle against Olivia Montgomery's skin, as she struggled helplessly against the ropes that bound her to the wooden post in the center of Cimarron, New Mexico territory. It was 1878, and her husband of 3 years, a man whose cruelty had grown with each passing season, had left her there for all to see punishment, he'd said, for speaking to another man at the general store that morning. "Please," she whispered through chattering teeth, her once beautiful blue dress now sodden and clinging to her shivering frame. The townspeople hurried past with averted eyes, unwilling to interfere in what they considered a domestic matter. Her golden hair, usually pinned neatly, hung in dripping tendrils around her face, obscuring her vision as the night grew darker and colder. Yards Ingram had only been in Cimarron for 2 days, passing through on his way to Colorado, when he saw her. He'd been leading his horse from the livery to the saloon, seeking shelter from the worsening storm, when he spotted the figure tied to the post in the muddy street. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but as lightning split the sky, he saw her clearly a woman, bound and abandoned in the rain. "Good Lord," he muttered, immediately changing course. His spurs jangled as he quickened his pace, splashing through puddles until he reached her. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Olivia lifted her head weakly, rainwater streaming down her face mixing with tears she'd long since stopped shedding. "Please, just go," she whispered. "He'll come back. He'll hurt you too." Yards pulled his hunting knife from his belt without hesitation. No man has the right to treat a woman this way. With quick, precise movements, he sliced through the ropes binding her to the post. As the final strand gave way, she collapsed forward into his arms, too weak to stand on her own. "No more chains," he said firmly, lifting her slight form easily against his chest. "Not for you, not ever again." Olivia's eyes fluttered as unconsciousness threatened to overtake her. "He'll kill you for this," she managed to whisper. "Victor will kill us both." "Let him try," Yards replied, his voice hardened by years on the frontier. He carried her toward the doctor's office at the edge of town, determined that this woman would not suffer another moment at her husband's hands. Little did he know that his act of compassion would set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. Dr. Harrison Miller looked up from his ledger when his door burst open, revealing a tall, rain-soaked cowboy carrying a half-conscious woman in his arms. "Doc, she needs help," Yards said, water pooling beneath his boots on the wooden floor. "Found her tied to a post in the street." The doctor's eyes widened as he recognized Olivia Montgomery. "Good heavens, bring her in here quickly." He led Yards to a small examination room, clearing papers from a cot. "Lay her down gently. That's Victor Montgomery's wife." "I don't care whose wife she is," Yards replied tersely, setting Olivia down with surprising tenderness. "No one deserves to be treated like an animal, doctor." Miller didn't argue as he began examining Olivia, who was shivering violently now, her skin cold to the touch. "She's suffering from exposure, and these marks on her wrists." He shook his head, a grim expression crossing his face. "This isn't the first time she's been bound tightly." Yards clenched his jaw, his hazel eyes darkening with anger. "Her husband did this." The doctor hesitated before nodding. "Victor Montgomery owns the largest cattle operation in the county. He's not a man to cross lightly." He reached for a blanket, carefully wrapping it around Olivia's shoulders. "I've treated Mrs. Montgomery before, but she always returns to him, claims she fell or had some other accident." "Not this time," Yards said firmly. "I told her no more chains, and I meant it." A weak voice joined their conversation. "You don't understand," Olivia murmured, her blue eyes focusing slowly on Yards. "He'll never let me go. He considers me his property, same as his horses or his land. Yards knelt beside the cot, his face level with hers. Mrs. Montgomery, I've seen men like your husband before. Men who think strength means cruelty, but there's nothing strong about hurting someone who depends on you. Dr. Miller cleared his throat. She needs rest and warmth, and you, sir, need to understand what you've involved yourself in. Victor Montgomery has the sheriff in his pocket and half the men in this territory working for him. I'm not afraid of Montgomery, Yards replied, standing to his full height of 6 feet 2 inches. At 32, he'd survived the war, Apache raids, and everything else the frontier had thrown at him. One cattle baron didn't scare him. You should be, Olivia whispered. But, thank you for cutting me free. I've never had anyone stand up for me before. The doctor gave Yards a pointed look. What's your name, stranger? Yards Ingram was heading to Denver when I stopped here for supplies. Well, Mr. Ingram, I suggest you resume your journey at first light, for your own safety. Yards looked down at Olivia, noting the fading bruise on her cheekbone that had nothing to do with tonight's ordeal. Something inside him hardened with resolve. I'll be staying a while longer, I think. Got business here now. Olivia's eyes widened. No, please, just go. I'll be fine. With all due respect, madam, you won't be fine if you go back to him. Yards removed his damp hat, running a hand through his dark brown hair. And I'm not the kind of man who can ride away knowing I've left someone in danger. Dr. Miller sighed heavily. Mrs. Montgomery can stay here tonight. My wife will help tend to her, but come morning decisions will need to be made. He looked sympathetically at Olivia. This can't continue, my dear. One day he'll go too far. He already has, Yards said firmly. Leaving her tied to a post in a rainstorm, that's not a husband, that's a monster. Victor wasn't always this way, Olivia said softly, tears welling in her eyes. When we first married, he was kind, attentive. I don't know when it changed. Men like that don't change overnight, Yards replied. They just get better at hiding who they really are until they think they own you. He'd seen it before with his own sister, who'd married a charming man who turned cruel behind closed doors. That situation had ended badly for all involved, and Yards had sworn he'd never stand by and watch it happen again. Dr. Miller began preparing a mild sedative. She needs rest now. Mr. Ingram, I suggest you find yourself a room at the hotel. Nothing more can be done tonight. I'll check in at the hotel, Yards agreed, but I'll be back in the morning. He looked at Olivia again, noticing how, despite everything, there was still strength in her eyes. Mrs. Montgomery, I promise you, you won't have to face him alone again. As he turned to leave, Olivia spoke once more. Mr. Ingram, thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away. He nodded, settling his damp hat back on his head. Rest now, madam. Tomorrow's another day. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, but thunder still rumbled in the distance. Yards headed for the Cimarron Hotel, his mind racing. He'd have to be careful. From what the doctor had said, Montgomery was powerful in these parts, and Yards was just a drifter with a horse, a rifle, and whatever skills he'd picked up in his years of wandering since the war. But he'd made a promise, and Yards Ingram wasn't a man who broke his word. The hotel clerk looked up warily when Yards entered. News traveled fast in small towns, and the clerk's nervous expression suggested he already knew what had happened. Need a room, Yards said simply, placing coins on the counter. We're, pretty full up, mister, the clerk replied, not meeting his eyes. Yards leaned forward slightly. Seems to me this town's a bit too comfortable looking the other way. I need a room. Now. The clerk swallowed hard before reluctantly taking the money and handing over a key. Room 4. Top of the stairs. Yards nodded his thanks and headed up to his room, which was small but clean. He removed his wet clothes, hanging them near the window to dry, and stretched out on the bed, his thoughts returning to the woman he'd rescued. There was something about Olivia Montgomery that had struck him deeply. Not just her beauty, which was considerable despite her bedraggled state, but the quiet dignity she maintained even when tied to that post. She hadn't begged or screamed, she'd endured, like someone who had learned that protests only made things worse. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of rain and ropes and a pair of haunting blue eyes. Morning arrived with clear skies, and the knowledge that Victor Montgomery would soon discover what had happened to his wife. Yards dressed quickly, strapped on his gun belt, and headed downstairs for breakfast. The dining room fell silent when he entered, conversation stopping mid-sentence as all eyes turned toward him. He ignored the stares, taking a seat at an empty table and ordering coffee and eggs from a nervous-looking waitress. He was halfway through his meal when the batwing doors to the hotel lobby swung open violently. A tall man with a thick mustache and expensive clothes stormed in, flanked by two rough-looking cowboys. His cold eyes scanned the room before landing on Yards. "That him?" he demanded of no one in particular, his voice carrying easily in the silent room. "That the drifter who took my wife." Yards continued eating, not bothering to look up. "Didn't take anyone, friend. Just cut free a woman who was being treated worse than a stray dog." The man, Victor Montgomery, presumably strode to Yards' table, his face flushed with anger. "You've interfered in matters that don't concern you, stranger. My wife is my business." Now Yards looked up, meeting the man's gaze steadily. "When you tie someone to a post in the rain for the whole town to see, you make it everybody's business." Montgomery's hand moved toward the pistol on his hip, but one of his men grabbed his arm, whispering something urgently in his ear. Montgomery's eyes narrowed, but he nodded slightly. "I don't know who you think you are," he said, leaning closer to Yards, "but I own this town, the sheriff, the bank, most of the businesses. You do well to remember that. And you do well to remember that treating people like property went out with the war." Yards replied calmly, taking another bite of his eggs. Montgomery straightened, adjusting his expensive jacket. "My wife will be returning home with me today. If you're still in Cimarron by sunset, you'll regret it." He turned to leave, then paused. "And if you've touched her, I'll kill you slow." Yards didn't respond, finishing his breakfast as Montgomery and his men departed. The other diners quickly resumed their conversations, though many cast surreptitious glances his way. The waitress approached timidly. "Mister, you don't know what you've done. Mr. Montgomery doesn't make idle threats." "Neither do I," Yards replied, placing money on the table. "And I didn't come looking for trouble, but I won't walk away from it either." He left the hotel and headed straight for the doctor's office, concerned that Montgomery might have gone there first. When he arrived, he found Dr. Miller looking worried but Olivia still safely resting in the back room. "He was here," the doctor confirmed, "demanding to see her. I told him she was in no condition to be moved, that it would be dangerous to her health." "And he accepted that?" Yards asked skeptically. "For now. But he'll be back, doctor." Miller led Yards to where Olivia was sitting up in bed, looking markedly better than she had the night before. Her golden hair had been brushed and braided by the doctor's wife, and some color had returned to her cheeks. "Mr. Ingram," she said softly when she saw him, "you're still here." "Said I would be, didn't I?" He removed his hat, holding it in his hands. "How are you feeling today, Mrs. Montgomery?" "Better, thank you." She looked down at her hands, which were folded neatly in her lap. "Victor came by earlier. Dr. Miller didn't let him see me, but he'll be back, Mrs. Montgomery." "Olivia," the doctor said gently, "we've discussed this. You can't go back to him, not this time." She looked up, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. Where would I go? I have no family left, no money of my own. You could head to Santa Fe, Dr. Miller suggested. Or even further east, start fresh somewhere Victor can't find you. Yards watched her face, seeing the momentary hope that flickered there before reality extinguished it. I have no means to travel, she said, and Victor would follow me. He's possessive. I'm heading to Denver, Yards found himself saying. You'd be welcome to travel under my protection. Both Olivia and the doctor looked at him in surprise. Mr. Ingram, that's very generous, Olivia said carefully. But you don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I know enough, Yards replied. I know you deserve better than being tied to a post in the rain. And sometimes in this life we have to help each other simply because it's the right thing to do. Dr. Miller looked thoughtful. It might work. If you left today, got a head start. Montgomery has influence, but it doesn't extend all the way to Colorado. Olivia shook her head. He'd follow us. He'd bring men. It would put Mr. Ingram in danger. I can handle myself, Yards assured her. And I think you know that staying here is the more dangerous option. He stepped closer to her bed. Mrs. Montgomery, I'm offering you a chance at freedom, but it has to be your choice. She looked up at him, studying his face as if searching for some sign of deception or ulterior motive. Finding none, she took a deep breath. If I were to accept, when would we leave? As soon as you're well enough to travel, today if possible, she nodded slowly. Then, yes, I accept your offer, Mr. Ingram. She squared her shoulders slightly. I won't be a burden. I can cook, so tend animals. I'm stronger than I look. I don't doubt that for a moment, Yards said with a small smile. Anyone who survived what you have has to be strong. Dr. Miller looked relieved. I'll help you prepare. My wife has some traveling clothes that might fit you, Olivia, and I can give you some supplies for the journey. We'll need to move quickly, Yards said. Montgomery will be watching the roads out of town. There's a back trail through the foothills, the doctor suggested. Few know about it. It adds half a day to the journey north, but it's unlikely you'd be followed. Yards nodded. That sounds like our best option. He turned back to Olivia. Rest a bit longer. I'll make preparations and return for you in 2 hours. She reached out suddenly, catching his hand. Her touch was light, hesitant. Why are you doing this, truly? He looked down at their joined hands, then met her eyes. Because a long time ago, someone I loved needed help and didn't get it. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can help save you. Before she could ask more questions, he gently withdrew his hand and left the room. There would be time for explanations later. Right now, they needed to focus on getting out of Cimarron alive. Yards spent the next 2 hours gathering supplies, purchasing extra ammunition, and preparing his horse for the added burden of a second rider. He also kept a watchful eye out for Montgomery's men, who seemed to be patrolling the main streets with increased frequency. At the appointed time, he approached the doctor's office cautiously, circling around to the back entrance as they had arranged. Dr. Miller was waiting, ushering him quickly inside. Olivia was dressed now in a simple brown traveling dress, her hair pinned up beneath a modest bonnet. She looked like a different woman from the one he'd rescued the night before, more determined, though still understandably frightened. My wife packed some food for your journey, Dr. Miller said, handing Yards a cloth-wrapped bundle. And here's a map showing the back trail I mentioned. He handed over a folded piece of paper. It's not much, but it should help. Thank you, Doctor. For everything, Yards said, shaking the man's hand. Olivia embraced Mrs. Miller, who had come to the doorway. I don't know how to repay your kindness. Live well, the older woman replied simply. That's repayment enough. Dr. Miller cleared his throat. You should go now. I'll create a distraction at the front of the building if needed. Yards nodded, offering his arm to Olivia. Ready. She took a deep breath and slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. As ready as I'll ever be. They slipped out the back door and into the alley behind the doctor's office. Yards had left his horse tied nearby, and they moved quickly toward it, keeping to the shadows of the buildings. Just as they reached the horse, a shout rang out from the street. "There! By the livery! Mount up," Yards said urgently, helping Olivia onto his horse before swinging up behind her. He kicked the animal into motion, heading not for the main road but for a narrow path that led toward the foothills east of town. Behind them, more shouts erupted, followed by the sound of horses being hastily mounted. Yards urged his horse faster, one arm wrapped securely around Olivia's waist to keep her steady. "Hold tight," he instructed as they left the last buildings of Cimarron behind and entered the scrubland that led to the foothills. The horse, a sturdy bay gelding, responded well despite carrying double, and soon they were climbing into rockier terrain where pursuing horsemen would have more difficulty following. Olivia clung to the saddle horn, her body tense but her voice steady when she spoke. "Are they following us?" Yards glanced back, seeing dust rising from the direction of town. "Yes, but we've got a head start, and once we're in those hills, we'll have the advantage." They rode hard for nearly an hour, following the crude map Dr. Miller had provided. The path took them through a narrow canyon, across a shallow stream, and up into increasingly dense pine forest. Only when they reached a high ridge did Yards finally slow their pace, allowing the horse to catch its breath. From their vantage point, they could see the vast expanse they had crossed, and in the distance, tiny figures of horsemen still searching the lower slopes. "We've lost them for now," Yards said, dismounting and helping Olivia down. Her legs trembled slightly, unused to such riding, but she straightened quickly, determined not to show weakness. "We'll rest here briefly, then continue north." Olivia nodded, moving to sit on a fallen log. "I can't believe I've done this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Left everything behind." Yards unscrewed his canteen and offered it to her. "What were you leaving behind that was worth keeping?" She took a small sip of water before answering. "It wasn't always bad. When I first met Victor, he was charming, attentive. My parents had died of influenza and I was alone in the world. He offered security, protection." She handed the canteen back to him. "The changes were so gradual I hardly noticed until it was too late. A sharp word here, a grab of my arm there, then the first slap." She trailed off, looking away. "How long were you married?" Yards asked quietly. 3 years. "We came to New Mexico from St. Louis shortly after we wed. I thought perhaps the fresh start would help, but it only got worse. Here he had no one watching him, judging him. He could do as he pleased." She met Yards' eyes. "Last night wasn't the first time he'd tied me up, but it was the first time he'd done it publicly." Yards' jaw tightened. "No man has the right to treat a woman that way. Not his wife, not anyone." "Many would disagree with you," Olivia said softly. "The law gives a husband certain rights over his wife." "The law is wrong," Yards replied firmly. "Just because something's legal doesn't make it right." She studied him curiously. "You're not like most men I've known, Mr. Ingram." "Yards," he corrected. "If we're going to be traveling together, you might as well use my given name." A small smile touched her lips. "Yards, it's unusual. Family name," he explained. "My mother's father was Yards Calloway. She insisted on naming me after him, said he was the finest man she'd ever known." "And I'm Olivia," she offered in return, "though I suppose you already knew that." "Olivia," he repeated, liking the way it felt on his tongue. "It suits you." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft nickering of the horse as it grazed on the sparse mountain grass. Yards checked the sun's position, estimating they had about 5 hours of daylight remaining. "We should keep moving," he said finally. "We need to put as much distance between us and Montgomery as possible before nightfall." Olivia rose without complaint, though he could see the weariness in her movements. "How far to Denver?" "About a week's ride, taking it steady. Less if we push hard, but that might be too much for the horse carrying double." He helped her back into the saddle. "We'll stop in smaller settlements along the way. I have some money saved, enough to get us there comfortably." She looked down at him, troubled. "I have nothing to repay you with." He mounted behind her, settling his arms around her to take the reins. "I'm not asking for repayment, Olivia. This isn't a transaction." "Everything in this world is a transaction, in my experience," she replied, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "People don't give without expecting something in return." "Then I guess your experience has been limited to the wrong kind of people," Yards said as he guided the horse back onto the trail. "There's still some good in this world. You just have to know where to look for it." She didn't respond to that, and they rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts as the trail wound ever northward through the rugged New Mexican countryside. By nightfall, they had covered impressive ground, reaching a small clearing beside a stream that Yards deemed suitable for making camp. He helped Olivia dismount, noting how she winced slightly at the movement. "Not used to long rides?" he asked sympathetically. Victor didn't approve of me riding, she admitted. "Said it wasn't ladylike." Yards snorted. "Sounds like Victor had a lot of opinions about what you should and shouldn't do." "He did," she agreed quietly. Yards busied himself setting up a small campfire while Olivia unpacked the food Mrs. Miller had prepared for them. They ate a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried meat, washing it down with fresh water from the stream. As darkness fell completely, the temperature dropped significantly, and Yards added more wood to the fire. He had only one bedroll, which he insisted Olivia take, despite her protests. "I've slept on harder ground with less cover," he assured her. "Take it. You need the rest more than I do." Eventually she relented, settling onto the bedroll while Yards positioned himself on the opposite side of the fire, his rifle close at hand. "You think they're still following us?" she asked, her voice small in the darkness. "Probably," he answered honestly. "Montgomery doesn't strike me as a man who gives up easily. But we've covered our tracks well, and this route isn't well known. It'll be difficult for them to find us." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm scared," she finally admitted. "Not just of Victor finding us, but of what happens after. I've never been on my own before. I went from my parents' home to my husband's. I don't know how to exist by myself." Yards watched the firelight play across her features. "You won't be alone in Denver, at least not right away. I have some contacts there. People who can help you get established, find work if you want it." "What kind of work could I do? I have no real skills." "You mentioned cooking, sewing. Those are valuable skills. Or you could work in a shop, perhaps. Denver's growing fast. There are opportunities for those willing to work." She nodded thoughtfully. "And what about you? What takes you to Denver?" Yards poked at the fire with a stick. "Bit of business, bit of unfinished personal matters. Nothing too exciting." "You're being deliberately vague," she observed with a hint of amusement. He smiled slightly. "Maybe. Let's just say I've been drifting for a while and it's time to stop for a bit. Put down some temporary roots." "How long have you been drifting?" she asked. "Since the war ended. 13 years now." He looked up at the stars, brilliant in the clear mountain sky. "Fought for the Union. Went home after to Tennessee, but everything had changed. Or maybe I had. Either way, didn't fit anymore." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That must have been difficult," he shrugged. "Life is difficult for most people in one way or another. We endure." "Yes," she agreed, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "We endure." Yards watched as her eyelids grew heavy, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with her. "Sleep," he encouraged. "I'll keep watch." She nodded, her eyes already closing. "Thank you, Yards, for everything." "You're welcome, Olivia," he replied, but she was already drifting into sleep. He stayed awake long into the night, listening to the sounds of the wilderness around them, alert for any sign of pursuit. But the only disturbances were the occasional hooting of an owl and the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Looking at Olivia's sleeping form, Yards felt a protective instinct he hadn't experienced in years. There was something about her that called to him, perhaps her quiet strength in the face of cruelty, or the dignity she maintained despite her circumstances. Whatever it was, he found himself making a silent promise that no harm would come to her, not while he had breath in his body. Dawn broke clear and cold, with a thin layer of frost coating the surrounding vegetation. Yards had dozed intermittently through the latter part of the night, but was already awake and rekindling the fire when Olivia stirred. She sat up, momentarily disoriented, before her eyes found Yards and remembrance dawned on her face. "Good morning," she said, her voice still thick with sleep. "Morning," he replied, offering her a cup of coffee he'd prepared. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected," she admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. "Though I'm a bit stiff. Riding will do that, especially when you're not used to it." He gestured to the stream. "If you'd like to freshen up, I'll turn my back, then we should get moving. I'd like to reach the Colorado border by nightfall if possible." She nodded, taking a quick sip of the coffee before setting it aside. "I won't be long." True to her word, Olivia returned quickly, her face freshly washed and her hair neatly rebraided beneath her bonnet. They ate a light breakfast from their provisions before packing up camp and continuing their journey. The day passed relatively uneventfully as they traveled through increasingly mountainous terrain. Yards kept a vigilant eye on their back trail, but there was no sign of pursuit. By mid-afternoon, they encountered a small trading post where Yards purchased additional supplies and inquired about conditions ahead. "Road to Colorado's clear enough," the weathered proprietor told them, "but there's talk of some trouble with renegade Utes up north. Might want to keep your wits about you." Yards thanked the man for the information, noticing how his eyes lingered curiously on Olivia, who was examining some fabric at the other end of the small store. "My wife and I appreciate the warning," he said pointedly, the lie coming easily to his lips for the sake of propriety and protection. The man's expression cleared with understanding. "Ah, newlyweds, are you? Unusual to be traveling these parts for a honeymoon." "Heading to Denver to start fresh," Yards replied, keeping his tone casual. "Any strangers come through here recently? We thought we saw riders behind us yesterday." "Just the usual traffic," the proprietor said. "Couple of miners, a family heading south. No one suspicious like." Yards nodded, relieved but not entirely convinced. Montgomery's men could be anywhere, asking similar questions. "Much obliged. We'll be on our way now." Outside, he helped Olivia back onto the horse. "I told him we were married," he explained quietly. "Simplifies things and raises fewer questions." She looked momentarily surprised, but then nodded in understanding. A sensible precaution. They continued north, the terrain gradually changing as they approached the Colorado border. The pine forests grew denser, the air cooler and crisper as their elevation increased. By late afternoon, dark clouds had begun gathering on the horizon, and Yards frowned at the sight. "Storm's coming. We should find shelter before it hits." "Is there a town nearby?" Olivia asked, glancing at the threatening sky. "Not that I know of. But there might be a homestead or line cabin we could use." He urged the horse to a slightly faster pace, scanning the landscape for any sign of human habitation. They were fortunate. Just as the first large raindrops began to fall, they crested a hill and spotted a small cabin nestled in a clearing below. Smoke rose from its chimney, indicating occupancy. "Let's try our luck," Yards suggested, guiding the horse down the slope. As they approached, the cabin door opened and an elderly man stepped out, shotgun in hand but not raised threateningly. "That's far enough, strangers," he called. "State your business." Yards reined in the horse at a respectful distance. "Just travelers seeking shelter from the storm, sir. My wife and I would be grateful for any hospitality you might offer." The old man squinted at them through the increasing rain, his weathered face skeptical. After a moment, he lowered his shotgun slightly. "Nasty storm coming. Wouldn't be Christian to turn folks away." He gestured toward a small lean-to beside the cabin. "Can put your horse there. Come on in once you've tended to it." "Thank you kindly," Yards replied, dismounting and helping Olivia down. The old man disappeared back into the cabin as Yards quickly led their horse to the shelter, removing its saddle and bridle, and making sure it had access to water and some feed that was stored there. By the time he and Olivia hurried to the cabin door, the rain was falling steadily, and distant thunder rumbled ominously. The old man opened the door at their knock, ushering them inside. The cabin was small but neat, with a stone fireplace providing both heat and light. A rough-hewn table with 2 chairs occupied one corner, while a narrow bed was positioned against the far wall. Various pelts decorated the walls, and hunting and trapping equipment hung from pegs. "Name's Ezekiel Porter," the old man said by way of introduction. "Most call me Zeke." "Yards Ingram," Yards replied, removing his hat. "And this is Olivia." Zeke nodded to each of them. "Stew's on the fire, not fancy, but it's hot. You're welcome to share it." "That's very kind," Olivia said, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. "We'd be happy to contribute our supplies to the meal." The old man waved away the offer. "Got plenty. Been trapping these hills for 30 years. Know how to provide for myself and guests." He gestured to the table. "Sit. Rest yourselves." They did as instructed, grateful for the warmth and shelter as the storm intensified outside, rain lashing against the small windows and thunder booming overhead. Zeke served them bowls of rabbit stew, which proved to be surprisingly flavorful, along with cornbread that he assured them was only a day old. They ate hungrily, the exertion of travel having built up their appetites. "Where you folks headed?" Zeke asked eventually, settling into a rocking chair near the fire with his own bowl. "Denver," Yards replied. "Got business there." Zeke nodded thoughtfully. "Long journey from New Mexico territory." Yards tensed slightly. "What makes you think we came from there?" the old man chuckled. "Been watching you approach for the last hour through my spyglass. Saw you coming up from the south. Plus, that dust on your boots is red clay. Only get that in the New Mexico territory." Yards relaxed slightly, impressed by the man's observational skills. "You've got sharp eyes." "Need 'em out here," Zeke replied. "Traveling alone can be dangerous these days." "Have you seen many people passing through recently?" Olivia asked, a hint of anxiety in her voice. Zeke studied her for a moment before answering. "Some, mostly honest folk. Couple of hard cases 2 days back, asking questions about a man and woman traveling together." He sipped his stew calmly. "Told him I hadn't seen anyone." Yards and Olivia exchanged glances. "These men," Yards said carefully, "did they say who they were looking for?" "Nope. But they had that look about them." "Hired guns." Zeke's eyes narrowed. "You two in some kind of trouble?" Yards considered how much to reveal. The old man had been kind to them, but caution was still warranted. Before he could decide, Olivia spoke. "I've left my husband," she said quietly but firmly. "He was cruel, Mr. Ingram helped me escape. Now my husband's men are hunting us." Zeke's weathered face softened with understanding. "Figured it might be something like that. Way you flinch when anyone moves too quick, madam." He looked at Yards appraisingly. "And you ain't wearing no wedding band despite calling her your wife earlier." "A necessary deception for safety," Yards admitted. "I apologize for the lie." The old man waved away the apology. "No need. World's full of worse sins than protecting a woman in trouble." He set his empty bowl aside. "You can stay the night. Storm won't let up till morning anyway. I'll take the floor. You two can have the bed." "We couldn't possibly," Olivia began, but Zeke cut her off. "Nonsense. These old bones have slept on harder ground than this floor. Besides, you look dead on your feet, girl." Yards nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Zeke. We accept your generosity, but I'll take the floor beside you. The lady can have the bed." The old man shrugged. "Suit yourself." He rose, gathering their empty bowls. "Those men who came through were headed north. If I were you, I'd consider changing course. Maybe head northwest a spell before turning back toward Denver." "Is there another route?" Yards asked. Zeke nodded, moving to a crude map pinned to one wall. "Old trappers trail through the mountains here. Adds a few days to your journey, but keeps you away from the main routes where they'd be watching." Yards studied the map carefully. "Seems like a wise precaution. Would you be willing to mark it for us?" "Already planning to," Zeke replied with a slight smile. "Got some paper around here somewhere." While the old man rummaged through his meager possessions, Olivia moved closer to Yards. "Can we trust him?" she whispered. "I think so," Yards replied quietly. "He could have turned us away or worse, and he already lied to Montgomery's men on our behalf without even knowing us." She nodded, accepting his assessment. "I'm sorry for speaking about our situation without consulting you first. No need to apologize. Your instincts were good." He glanced at her, noting the fatigue evident in her face despite her efforts to hide it. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." True to Zeke's prediction, the storm continued throughout the night, rain drumming steadily on the cabin roof. Yards slept fitfully on the floor, his mind troubled by thoughts of pursuit and the dangers that still lay ahead. Whenever he woke, his eyes would invariably drift to Olivia's sleeping form on the bed, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been while awake. Morning brought clearing skies and renewed determination. After a breakfast of cornmeal mush and coffee, they prepared to depart, Yards insisting on leaving some money with Zeke despite the old man's protests. "For your trouble," Yards said firmly, pressing the coins into Zeke's calloused palm. "And for the map." The trapper had indeed drawn them a detailed map of the alternative route to Denver, marking water sources and possible shelter spots along the way. "Should keep you clear of the main trails for at least 3 days, he explained. "By then, you'll be far enough north that your husband's men might have given up or lost your trail." Olivia surprised both men by embracing Zeke impulsively. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for your kindness to strangers." The old man patted her back awkwardly. "Been alone out here a long time. Nice to help someone now and again." He stepped back, clearing his throat gruffly. "Best be on your way now. Daylight's wasting." Yards and Olivia mounted up, waving goodbye as they rode away from the cabin. The ground was muddy from the night's rain, but the air was fresh and clean, and their spirits were higher than they had been since beginning their journey. They followed Zeke's map carefully, taking the narrow trail that wound through dense forest and occasionally steep terrain. It was slower going than the main routes would have been, but the security of avoiding potential pursuers made the extra time worthwhile. As they rode, Yards found himself increasingly aware of Olivia's presence before him in the saddle. The way she held herself with quiet dignity. the faint scent of lavender that somehow clung to her hair despite days on the trail, the strength in her slender frame that belied her delicate appearance. For her part, Olivia seemed to grow more comfortable with their proximity as time passed. Where initially she had sat stiffly, trying to minimize contact between their bodies, now she leaned back slightly against his chest when the terrain was particularly difficult, trusting him to keep her secure. They talked more freely as well, sharing stories of their lives before circumstances had brought them together. Yards told her about growing up in Tennessee, his service during the war, and his subsequent wanderings throughout the Western Territories. Olivia spoke of her childhood in St. Louis, her parents' deaths, and her initial hope that marriage to Victor Montgomery would provide her with security and perhaps even happiness. "I was naive," she admitted as they stopped to rest by a stream around midday. "I saw what I wanted to see in Victor. Ignored the warning signs because I was afraid of being alone in the world." "You were young," Yards said kindly, "and alone. It's natural to seek safety." "Perhaps, but I've learned my lesson. I'll never again give anyone that kind of power over me." She looked at him directly. "Not even you, Yards Ingram, kind as you've been." He smiled slightly at that. "I wouldn't want such power, Olivia. Every person should be free to make their own choices. That's what I meant when I cut you free and said no more chains, not just the physical ropes, but all of it." She studied his face, seeming to search for any sign of deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "I believe you, and that's unusual for me now, to trust a man's words." "I'm honored by your trust," he replied simply, "and I'll do my best to be worthy of it." They continued their journey through the afternoon, making good progress despite the challenging terrain. By evening, they had reached a high meadow that offered both grazing for the horse and a protected spot to make camp. As Yards built a small fire, Olivia unpacked their provisions, laying out a simple dinner. They ate companionably, watching as the setting sun painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "It's beautiful here," Olivia observed softly. "So different from Cimarron." "From anywhere I've been, really." "The mountains have their own kind of beauty," Yards agreed. "Harsh sometimes, but honest. What you see is what you get." "Unlike people," she said with a hint of bitterness. "Some people," he corrected gently. "Not all." She glanced at him, a small smile touching her lips. "No, not all." They fell silent, comfortable in each other's company as night fell fully and stars appeared overhead. Yards added more wood to the fire, ensuring it would last through the cooler mountain night. "Yards." Olivia's voice was hesitant when she finally spoke again. "May I ask you something personal, of course? Earlier you mentioned someone you couldn't save. Who was it?" He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "My sister, Rebecca." The name felt strange on his tongue. He rarely spoke it aloud anymore. "She married young like you. A man named Daniel Harrington. Seemed decent at first, but—" He trailed off, old memories surfacing painfully. "He wasn't," Olivia finished for him. Yards nodded. "I was away fighting when it started. By the time I returned home she was different, quiet, afraid of her own shadow." His hands tightened into fists. "I suspected, but she denied everything, said she was happy." "It's not easy to admit," Olivia said softly. "There's shame and fear." "I know that now, but then, I wanted to believe her, wanted to think my little sister had found happiness." He took a deep breath. "I left again after a few months, went west. We exchanged letters occasionally, but she never hinted at any problems." Olivia waited patiently as he gathered himself to continue. 2 years later, I received a letter from our neighbor. Rebecca was dead. Harrington claimed she'd fallen down the stairs, but—" He swallowed hard. "The neighbor said there had been bruises before. That everyone in town knew but did nothing, just like in Cimarron." "I'm so sorry," Olivia whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. I went back, found Harrington. He didn't deny it when I confronted him, just said she'd been difficult, that she'd needed discipline. Yard's voice hardened. I killed him, Olivia, left him in the same house where he'd beaten my sister to death. She didn't recoil from his confession as he'd half expected. Instead, she reached across the space between them and placed her hand on his. You did what the law wouldn't. Maybe. But it didn't bring Rebecca back, and it didn't erase my guilt for not seeing the truth sooner, for not helping her when I had the chance. He met Olivia's eyes. When I saw you tied to that post, all I could think was that this time I wouldn't look away. This time I would help. You did, she assured him, her fingers tightening around his. You saved me, Yards. He turned his hand over, tentatively lacing his fingers with hers. Perhaps we're saving each other. They sat like that for a long while, hands joined, the fire crackling between them. Something was shifting between them, a connection forming that went beyond rescuer and rescued. When Olivia finally withdrew her hand to prepare for sleep, Yards felt the absence of her touch keenly. He watched as she settled onto the bedroll, which he had once again insisted she take. "Good night, Yards," she said softly. "Good night, Olivia," he replied. "Sleep well." As he had the night before, Yards kept watch through the early hours, his rifle across his knees, but his thoughts were less troubled now, focused not on dangers behind but on possibilities ahead. For the next 3 days, they followed Zeke's map through the wilderness, gradually working their way north and west before turning back toward Denver. The journey was physically demanding but peaceful, with no sign of Montgomery's men or any other threats. Each day brought them closer not just to Denver but to each other as well. Conversations flowed more easily. Silences became comfortable rather than awkward, and Yards found himself increasingly aware of Olivia as a woman rather than simply someone under his protection. For her part, Olivia seemed to blossom away from her husband's shadow. The farther they traveled from New Mexico, the more of her true personality emerged, intelligent, occasionally witty, with an unexpected curiosity about the world around her. "Victor never allowed me to read anything but the Bible and household manuals," she confessed one evening as they camped beside a small lake. "Said women's minds weren't meant for serious subjects." "That's ridiculous," Yards replied. "Some of the smartest people I've known have been women." "Really? Like who?" He smiled at her eager interest. "Well, there was a school teacher in Wyoming Territory, Miss Abigail Crawford, could quote Shakespeare and calculate sums faster than anyone I've ever seen. And there was a doctor in California, female doctor, name of Elizabeth Chen. Treated minors, cowboys, everyone. Saved my life once when I took a bullet in the shoulder." "A female doctor," Olivia marveled. "I didn't know such things were possible." "The world's changing," Yards told her. "Slowly maybe, but it is. Denver's a growing city, modern. You might find opportunities there you never imagined in Cimarron." "I hope so," she said, her eyes reflecting the campfire's flames. "I want to learn, to become someone, useful, independent." "You will," he assured her. "You've already shown more courage than most people ever need to." She laughed softly at that. "Necessity rather than courage, I think. Sometimes they're the same thing." On the morning of the 6th day since leaving Cimarron, they crested a rise and saw Denver spread before them in the distance, a growing city nestled against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains. Olivia gasped at the sight. "It's so much larger than I imagined." "And getting bigger every day," Yards confirmed. "Gold, silver, the railroad, they're all bringing people and prosperity." "And we'll arrive by nightfall?" she asked, a mix of excitement and anxiety in her voice. "Sooner if we push on." He paused, suddenly reluctant to end their journey. These days on the trail with Olivia had awakened feelings in him he'd thought long buried: protectiveness, certainly, but also admiration, respect, and something deeper that he hesitated to name. "Unless you'd prefer to take our time." She turned slightly in the saddle to look at him, her expression unreadable. "What happens when we reach Denver Yards?" It was the question that had been hovering unspoken between them. "I have a friend there. Nathan Bailey owns a hotel. He can provide you with safe lodging while you decide what you want to do next. And you?" Her blue eyes searched his face. "I'll make sure you're settled, safe." He hesitated, uncertain how to express what he really wanted to say. "After that, well, that would be up to you." "Up to me," she repeated thoughtfully. "You said you never wanted anyone to have power over you again," he reminded her. "That includes me deciding your future." She nodded slowly, turning back to face forward. "Let's continue then. I'm eager to see this city you've described so vividly." They rode on, the landscape gradually changing from wilderness to scattered homesteads, then to more densely settled areas as they approached the outskirts of Denver. By mid-afternoon, they were riding through the bustling streets of the city itself. Olivia stared wide-eyed at the sights around them: brick buildings several stories tall, ladies in fashionable dresses, men in business suits rather than trail clothes, carriages and wagons creating a constant flow of traffic. "It's overwhelming," she murmured. "You'll get used to it," Yards assured her, guiding their horse through the busy streets toward the central part of town. "The Bailey house is just ahead." The hotel was an impressive 3-story building with large windows and a freshly painted sign. Yards reined in before the entrance, dismounting and helping Olivia down. Her legs trembled slightly after so many hours in the saddle, and she steadied herself with a hand on his arm. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes meeting his briefly before looking away. A stable boy came to take their horse, and Yards led Olivia into the hotel's lobby. The interior was well appointed without being ostentatious: polished wooden floors, comfortable-looking furniture, a reception desk of dark mahogany. The man behind the desk looked up as they entered, his face breaking into a broad smile when he recognized Yards. "Ingram, you old devil!" He came around the desk, hand extended. Yards grasped it warmly. "Nathan, good to see you." He turned to Olivia. "May I present Mrs. Olivia Montgomery?" "Olivia, this is Nathan Bailey, proprietor of this fine establishment and an old friend." Nathan bowed slightly to Olivia. "A pleasure, madam. Any friend of Yards is welcome here." "Thank you, Mr. Bailey," Olivia replied, her manners impeccable despite her trail-worn appearance. "Your hotel is lovely. Kind of you to say." Nathan's eyes darted between them curiously. "I assume you'll be wanting rooms, plural or singular?" "Plural," Yards said firmly, ignoring the knowing look in his friend's eyes. "The best you have available for Mrs. Montgomery, and something simple for myself." "Of course." Nathan returned to his desk, selecting keys. "We have a very nice corner suite on the second floor, Mrs. Montgomery, and Yards, I can put you in room 12 just down the hall." "Perfect," Yards agreed, reaching for his wallet. Nathan waved him off. "We'll settle accounts later. You both look like you could use rest and refreshment first. Sarah will show you to your rooms." He summoned a young maid who led them up a broad staircase to the second floor. Olivia's room was indeed a suite, with a sitting room, bedroom, and private bathroom luxuries she clearly hadn't expected, judging by her wide-eyed expression as she took in her surroundings. "Will there be anything else, madam?" the maid asked. "Perhaps a bath could be arranged." Yards suggested, noting how Olivia hesitated. "For both rooms, of course, sir. Right away." The maid curtsied slightly before departing. Left alone with Olivia in the sitting room of her suite, Yards suddenly felt awkward, unsure what to say. Their journey had created an intimacy between them that seemed at odds with these civilized surroundings. "This is very generous," Olivia said, breaking the silence. "I can't possibly afford it's taken care of," he assured her. "Consider it part of your fresh start." She looked troubled. "You've already done so much. I can't keep accepting your charity." "It's not charity, Olivia." He moved closer, driven by an impulse he couldn't quite name. "I want to help you, not because I pity you or expect anything in return, but because—" He trailed off, searching for the right words. "Because," she prompted softly, her eyes meeting his. "Because I care what happens to you," he finished simply. "More than I expected to." A flush of color touched her cheeks. I care what happens to you too, Yards, these past days." She looked away, seemingly unable to continue. Before he could respond, a knock at the door announced the arrival of hotel staff with hot water for Olivia's bath. Yards stepped back, the moment broken. "I should let you rest," he said. "Perhaps we could meet for dinner. The hotel restaurant is quite good, as I recall." She nodded. "I'd like that. 7 o'clock. 7 it is." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Olivia, welcome to Denver and to freedom." Her smile was like sunrise after a long, dark night. "Thank you, Yards, for everything." He nodded once before slipping out, closing the door quietly behind him. As he walked to his own room, Yards found himself already counting the hours until dinner. The hotel restaurant was indeed excellent, its tables covered with white cloths and lit by gas lamps that cast a warm, flattering light. Yards arrived early, having bathed, shaved, and changed into the one decent suit he carried in his saddlebags for such occasions. He felt strangely nervous, as if this were a formal courtship rather than a simple meal between traveling companions. When Olivia entered the restaurant at precisely 7 o'clock, his breath caught in his throat. She had borrowed or purchased a dress emerald green silk that complemented her fair coloring perfectly. Her golden hair was arranged in an elegant style, and though she wore no jewelry, she needed none to look utterly beautiful. Yards rose as she approached their table, suddenly conscious of every eye in the room following her progress. "Olivia," he greeted her, pulling out her chair, "you look magnificent." She blushed prettily as she took her seat. "Thank you. Mrs. Bailey was kind enough to lend me the dress. Apparently, she and I are of similar size." "It suits you," he said, retaking his own seat. "Though I must say you look just as beautiful in that borrowed traveling dress on the trail." Her blush deepened. "You flatter me, sir." "Not flattery, just truth." He signaled to the waiter, ordering wine for both of them. "How do you find your accommodations?" "Almost overwhelming after so many nights under the stars," she admitted. "The bath alone was heaven." They fell into easy conversation as dinner progressed, discussing their journey, the city around them, and their impressions of the Bailey house. Only when dessert was served did Yards broach the more serious topic of Olivia's future. "Nathan's wife, Sarah, runs a small dressmaking shop connected to the hotel," he told her. "She mentioned she's looking for an assistant. If you're interested, I could arrange an introduction." Olivia looked thoughtful. "I do know how to sew, though not at a professional level." She'd be willing to train the right person. "The position includes room and board, as I understand it." "That's very kind," she hesitated. "But I don't want to rely on your connections forever, Yards. I need to learn to make my own way." He nodded, respecting her independence. "Of course. It would just be a starting point." "Then yes, I'd appreciate the introduction." She sipped her wine, a shadow crossing her face. "Do you think Victor will eventually find me here?" Yards considered the question carefully. "It's possible he might learn you came to Denver. But it's a growing city, easy to disappear in. and Montgomery's influence doesn't extend this far north. I hope you're right. She set her glass down, her fingers tracing its stem absently. I have nightmares sometimes, that he finds me, takes me back. Without thinking, Yards reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I won't let that happen. I promise. She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. How long will you stay in Denver, Yards? It was the question he'd been asking himself all afternoon. I'm not sure, he admitted. I have business here that might take weeks to conclude. After that, he trailed off, reluctant to commit to leaving when everything in him wanted to stay. After that, you'll move on, she finished for him, withdrawing her hand gently. As you always do. Perhaps. Or perhaps not. He met her eyes directly. Olivia, these past days with you, they've changed something in me, made me question whether I want to keep drifting. Hope flickered briefly in her eyes before she guarded her expression. Yards, I'm grateful for everything you've done. More than I can express, but I don't want your pity or your sense of obligation. Is that what you think this is? He asked, surprised. Isn't it? You rescued me, protected me, brought me to safety. It's natural you'd feel responsible for me. There's more to it than that, he insisted quietly. Much more. Before she could respond, a commotion at the restaurant entrance drew their attention. A hotel employee seemed to be arguing with someone who was trying to enter. Yards couldn't see the person's face, but something about the confrontation set his nerves on edge. Perhaps we should retire, he suggested, signaling for the bill. It's been a long day. Olivia nodded, her earlier openness replaced by a guarded politeness that troubled him. They left the restaurant through a side door, avoiding the disturbance, and Yards escorted her upstairs to her room. At her door, she turned to face him. Thank you for dinner and for everything else. Olivia, he began, needing to clear the air between them. What I said downstairs. She placed a finger gently against his lips, silencing him. Not tonight, Yards, please. I need time to think. To understand my own feelings without complications. He nodded, respecting her request though it cost him. Good night, then. Good night. She entered her room, closing the door quietly but firmly behind her. Yards stood in the hallway for a long moment, troubled by the sense that something precious was slipping through his fingers. Finally, he turned toward his own room, unaware of the danger that was already closing in around them. Morning brought a knock on Yards' door. He opened it to find Nathan Bailey looking unusually serious. We need to talk, Nathan said without preamble. Privately. Yards stepped aside, allowing his friend to enter. What is it? Nathan closed the door before speaking. There were men in the saloon last night, asking questions about a woman matching Mrs. Montgomery's description, and about a man traveling with her. Yards felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Montgomery's men. I thought as much, from what little you've told me about your traveling companion. Nathan's expression was grim. They were offering a substantial reward for information. Did anyone talk? Not that I know of. I made it clear that discussing hotel guests wasn't tolerated. Nathan sighed. But money loosens tongues, Yards. It's only a matter of time before someone says something. Yards began pacing the small room. I need to warn Olivia. We may have to leave Denver sooner than planned. There's more, Nathan said, stopping him. The men described Mrs. Montgomery as a runaway wife, said her husband was heartbroken, desperate to find her. Lies, Yards spat. He tied her to a post in the rain like an animal, left her there for the whole town to see. Nathan's eyebrows rose. That's not what they're telling people. Of course not. Yards ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Did these men give names, called themselves Smith and Jones? Nathan's tone made it clear what he thought of that. But from their accents and appearance, they're New Mexico men for sure. Rough types. Hired guns, I'd wager. How many? Just the two so far. but they hinted others were coming, including her husband. Yards felt his jaw tighten. Montgomery's coming himself. That's unexpected. Yards, Nathan said seriously. I've known you a long time, seen you handle yourself in tough situations, but this is different. If this woman is legally married and her husband wants her back, the law would be on his side, Yards finished. I know. But the law isn't always right, Nathan. You know that as well as I do, his friend sighed. Just be careful, and know that Sarah and I will help however we can. Mrs. Montgomery seems like a fine woman. She doesn't deserve to be dragged back to a man who'd mistreat her. No, she doesn't. Yards checked his pocket watch. It was still early, not yet 8 o'clock. I need to speak with Olivia, now. Nathan nodded. I'll keep an eye out for those men, try to delay them if they return. After his friend departed, Yards dressed quickly and went to Olivia's suite, knocking softly on the door. When there was no immediate answer, he knocked again, harder this time. Olivia, it's Yards. We need to talk. The door opened to reveal Olivia in a simple day dress, her hair braided simply down her back. Yards, what's wrong? May I come in? He asked, glancing down the hallway to ensure they weren't observed. She stepped back, allowing him entry. As soon as the door closed behind him, he spoke. Montgomery's men are here in Denver, asking questions about us. The color drained from her face. Already? How is that possible? They must have been close behind us all along, or perhaps they guessed our destination and took a more direct route. He took her hands in his, concerned by how cold they felt. Olivia, Nathan says your husband may be coming himself. She swayed slightly, and he led her to a nearby chair. I knew he wouldn't give up, she whispered. He considers me his property, something that belongs to him. You belong to no one but yourself, Yards said firmly, kneeling before her chair. And I won't let him take you back, but we need to be cautious. Consider our options. She looked at him, fear and determination warring in her eyes. What options do I have, Yards? The law recognizes Victor as my husband. He has rights over me that no one can dispute. We could leave Denver, he suggested. Go further west, California perhaps, or north to Wyoming territory. Running forever, she shook her head. That's not living, that's just existing in fear. Then we fight, Yards said simply. Not with guns, though I would if necessary, but with the truth. The people of Denver need to know what kind of man Victor Montgomery really is. Who would believe me over him? He's wealthy, respected in New Mexico, but not known here. Yards squeezed her hands gently. Nathan and Sarah Bailey believe you. They'll stand with us. And there may be others, the doctor in Cimarron who treated your injuries, perhaps Zeke from the cabin. Hope flickered briefly in her eyes. You think that would be enough? I don't know, he admitted honestly. But I do know that hiding in fear is no way to live. You deserve better than that. She studied his face for a long moment. Why are you doing this, Yards? Truly? You could have left me in Denver, continued on your way. No one would blame you. I would blame me, he said simply. But it's more than that. He took a deep breath. Olivia, I care for you. More than I should, perhaps, given the circumstances. But I can't deny what I feel. Her eyes widened slightly, but before she could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. They both tensed, and Yards moved instinctively to place himself between Olivia and the potential threat. Mrs. Montgomery, a female voice called. It's Sarah Bailey. I have a message for you. Olivia relaxed slightly, and Yards opened the door to admit Nathan's wife, a handsome woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a practical manner. I'm sorry to interrupt, Sarah said, noting Yards' presence with a raised eyebrow but making no comment. But 2 men are downstairs asking specifically for Mrs. Montgomery. Nathan is delaying them, but he can't hold them off indefinitely. Montgomery's men, Yards confirmed grimly. Did they give their real names this time? They're calling themselves Jenkins and Doyle, Sarah replied. But Nathan recognizes them from last night, the ones who were asking questions in the saloon. Olivia's face paled further. Doyle was Victor's foreman, a cruel man if he's here. We need to move you somewhere safer, Yards decided. Sarah, is the back staircase clear? For now, yes. But where would she go? They'll check every hotel in Denver. Yards thought quickly. Your shop. Could she stay there temporarily, just until we decide on a more permanent solution? Sarah nodded. There's a small room in the back, storage mostly, but it has a cot for when I work late. She turned to Olivia. It's not much, but you'd be safe there. Few people know it connects to the hotel. I'll take it, Olivia said, rising from her chair with new determination. What should I bring? Just essentials, Sarah advised. Leave most of your things here to make it appear you're still occupying the room. While Olivia quickly gathered a few items, Yards outlined his plan to Sarah. Nathan should tell these men that Mrs. Montgomery is not receiving visitors, that she's indisposed. Meanwhile, I'll try to learn more about their intentions and how many others might be coming. And if her husband arrives, Sarah asked, then we'll deal with that when it happens. Yard's expression hardened. But he won't take her, not again, not while I'm breathing. Sarah studied him thoughtfully. You care for her. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. Yes, good. She deserves someone who values her. Sarah's attention turned to Olivia, who had emerged from the bedroom with a small bundle. Ready, my dear? Olivia nodded, her gaze finding Yards. What will you do? Stay here for now. Make it seem normal. I'll come to you as soon as I can. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Olivia, I meant what I said before about my feelings. Whatever happens, know that. She reached up, touching his cheek briefly. Be careful, Yards, these men. They won't hesitate to hurt you. I've faced worse, he assured her with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. The stakes had never been so personal before. Sarah led Olivia to the door, checking the hallway before they stepped out. The back stairs are this way. Quickly now. As they disappeared down the corridor, Yards turned his attention to preparing for the confrontation that was sure to come. He checked his revolver, making sure it was loaded and functioning smoothly. He didn't want violence, it would only complicate their situation, but he wouldn't be caught unprepared either. 20 minutes later, a heavier knock came at the door of Olivia's suite. Yards had positioned himself in the sitting room, appearing casual though every muscle was tensed for action. Mrs. Montgomery, a gruff voice called. Message from your husband. Yards opened the door to find two men standing in the hallway, both wearing trail clothes of good quality, with the dust of hard riding still on their boots. Both were armed, though their guns remained holstered. They looked surprised to find a man answering the door. The taller one recovered first. Who the hell are you? Name's Ingram, Yards replied calmly. Mrs. Montgomery is not available at the moment. The men exchanged glances. You the one that took her from Cimarron? The shorter, stockier man demanded. I helped a woman who was being mistreated, Yards corrected. Tied to a post in the rain like an animal. That the kind of thing you boys consider proper treatment of a lady, the taller man, Doyle, presumably stepped forward menacingly. That ain't your concern, mister. Mrs. Montgomery belongs with her husband. We aim to see she gets back to him. She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go, Yards said, his voice hardening. And she certainly doesn't belong to anyone. The law says different, Doyle replied with a smirk. A husband has rights, and Mr. Montgomery is on his way here now to claim what's his. Yards felt a surge of anger but kept his expression neutral. When does he arrive? Tomorrow, most likely, the stocky man Jenkins answered. Traveling by private coach, and he ain't alone. More hired guns? Yards asked scornfully. Doyle's eyes narrowed. The sheriff of Cimarron County, with papers, Legal papers, so you best get out of the way, mister, unless you want to find yourself in a cell, or worse." Yards considered his options carefully. Direct confrontation now would gain him nothing and might endanger Olivia further. Better to bide his time, gather more information. "I'll inform Mrs. Montgomery of her husband's impending arrival," he said finally. "It will be her decision whether to see him or not." Jenkins laughed harshly. "Ain't her decision to make. She's a wife, property, just like the law says." "Times are changing," Yards replied evenly. "And Denver isn't Cimarron. People here might take a different view of a man who ties his wife to a post in the rain." The men exchanged uncomfortable glances, suggesting the story of Victor's cruelty wasn't the one they'd been telling in Denver. "You're meddling in affairs that don't concern you, Ingram," Doyle said, his hand drifting closer to his gun. "Best remember that." "And you're threatening the wrong man," Yards responded, not backing down. "I suggest you both leave now before this becomes something you'll regret." The standoff lasted several tense seconds before Jenkins placed a restraining hand on Doyle's arm. "Come on. Mr. Montgomery will handle this himself when he arrives." With final glares at Yards, the men turned and walked away down the hallway. Yards closed the door, releasing a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The situation was deteriorating faster than he'd anticipated. If Montgomery was bringing the sheriff from Cimarron with official papers, he needed to warn Olivia, and they needed to make plans quickly. The dressmaking shop occupied a narrow storefront adjacent to the hotel, with large windows displaying several fashionable gowns. Yards entered casually, as if browsing, finding Sarah Bailey attending to a customer. She caught his eye briefly, tilting her head almost imperceptibly toward a curtained doorway at the rear of the shop. After the customer departed, Sarah locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. "They came to the suite?" she asked without preamble. Yards nodded. "Montgomery himself arrives tomorrow, apparently, with the sheriff from Cimarron County and legal papers of some kind." Sarah's expression grew troubled. "That complicates matters. Where is she?" "In the back room. Come." She led him through the curtained doorway into a workroom filled with fabrics, patterns, and several dressmakers' dummies. Beyond this was a smaller room, little more than a closet really, where Olivia sat on a narrow cot. She rose when she saw him, relief evident in her face. "Yards." "You're all right." "I'm fine," he assured her, "but we have a situation." He quickly relayed what he had learned from Doyle and Jenkins. Olivia sank back onto the cot, her face pale. "Victor is coming himself with the sheriff." She looked up at Yards, fear in her eyes. "He means to take me back by force of law." "We won't let that happen," Sarah said firmly. "Nathan has friends in the Denver police. Good men who wouldn't stand for a woman being mistreated, legal papers or not." "Can we be certain of that?" Yards asked. "Sheriffs are supposed to respect each other's authority. If Cimarron's sheriff has legal documents, then we need our own legal help," Sarah decided. "Nathan knows a lawyer, Jeremy Walsh. He specializes in helping women in difficult situations. I'll send for him immediately." Olivia looked between them, a spark of hope lighting her eyes. "Do you think he could help me? Truly, it's worth trying," Yards said, sitting beside her on the cot and taking her hand in his. "I promised you no more chains, Olivia. I meant it." Sarah watched them for a moment, a small smile touching her lips. "I'll go find Nathan, have him send for Mr. Walsh right away." She slipped out, leaving them alone. Olivia's fingers tightened around Yards. "I'm sorry to have brought this trouble to your friends." "They're helping because they want to," he assured her. "Good people do that. It's something you'll need to get used to again, being treated with kindness and respect." She looked down at their joined hands. "Yards, before, in my room, what you said about your feelings." "I meant it," he said simply. But this isn't the time to, it is the time, she interrupted, meeting his gaze directly. Because tomorrow everything might change, and I need you to know that I care for you two, more than I thought possible after everything. His heart seemed to skip a beat. Olivia, please, let me finish. She took a deep breath. When you cut me free from that post, you didn't just save me physically. You reminded me that there are good men in this world, men who see women as people, not possessions. And during our journey here, I've come to see in you the kind of man I once hoped Victor might be, strong but gentle, protective but respectful of my choices. Yards reached up, cupping her cheek gently. I want you to be free, Olivia, to make your own decisions, your own life, but I hope there might be a place for me in that life if you want it. I do, she whispered, leaning into his touch, but I'm still legally bound to Victor. And tomorrow we'll face together, he promised. Whatever comes. The moment hung between them, charged with emotion and possibility. Slowly, Yards leaned forward, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she met him halfway, her lips touching his in a kiss so gentle it was barely more than a breath. When they parted, her eyes were shining with unshed tears. Not of sadness, he thought, but of hope, fragile but real. No matter what happens tomorrow, she said softly, I'm grateful to have known you, Yards Ingram. He smiled, brushing a strand of golden hair from her face. This isn't an ending, Olivia. It's a beginning, for both of us. A discreet knock interrupted them, and Sarah Bailey's voice came through the door. Mr. Walsh is here. He'd like to speak with Mrs. Montgomery. The lawyer was a surprisingly young man, barely 30, with intelligent eyes and a serious demeanor. He listened attentively as Olivia recounted her marriage to Victor Montgomery, the gradual escalation of abuse, and finally the incident in Cimarron that had led to her escape with Yards. And you have no family who might support your desire to separate from your husband? Walsh asked, making notes in a small book. None, Olivia confirmed. My parents died years ago. I have no siblings, no close relatives. Walsh nodded thoughtfully. And are there witnesses to Mr. Montgomery's mistreatment? Besides Mr. Ingram, who could be portrayed as biased. Yards bristled slightly at the implication, but understood the lawyer was simply being thorough. The doctor in Cimarron, he suggested. Dr. Miller. He treated Olivia's injuries on multiple occasions. And his wife, Olivia added. She helped tend to me that night. That's helpful, Walsh said, continuing to write. Anyone else? The whole town saw her tied to that post, Yards said, his anger rising at the memory, but most looked away. Pretended not to see. Which is precisely the problem we face, Walsh explained. Without multiple credible witnesses, it becomes your word against his, and in the eyes of the law, a husband has considerable authority over his wife. So there's nothing we can do? Olivia asked, her voice small. Walsh closed his notebook. I didn't say that. There are options, though none without risk. He leaned forward. Mrs. Montgomery, are you absolutely certain you wish to separate from your husband? The path will not be easy. I would rather die than return to him, she said with quiet intensity. Whatever the cost, it cannot be worse than the life I was living. The lawyer nodded, satisfied. Then here is what I propose. When your husband arrives tomorrow with the Cimarron sheriff, we will not hide. Instead, we will confront them openly, but on our terms. We'll arrange a meeting at the office of Judge William Henderson, a fair-minded man who believes in justice above the letter of the law. And what will that accomplish? Yards asked skeptically. It gives us the home field advantage, Walsh explained. Forces Montgomery to make his case on unfamiliar ground, before a judge who isn't in his pocket. and it allows us to present Mrs. Montgomery as a rational, respectable woman making a reasonable request for protection, not as a runaway wife being hunted down. Protection on what grounds? Olivia asked. Cruelty, Walsh said simply. Colorado Territory has more progressive laws regarding marriage than New Mexico. While divorce remains difficult, a judge can grant a legal separation with maintenance in cases of extreme cruelty. It's not freedom, but it would legally prevent Montgomery from forcing you to return to his home. Hope flickered in Olivia's eyes. And you think Judge Henderson might grant such a separation? If we present a compelling case, yes. Walsh's expression turned serious. But I must warn you, your husband will likely fight this vigorously. He may make accusations against you, question your character, your sanity. It will not be pleasant. I can endure it, Olivia said firmly. I've endured worse at his hands. And she won't face it alone, Yards added, his voice leaving no room for doubt. Walsh studied them both for a moment before nodding. Very well. I'll arrange the meeting with Judge Henderson for tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, Mrs. Montgomery should remain here out of sight. Mr. Ingram, it might be best if you continue to occupy her hotel suite to maintain the appearance that she's still there. Agreed, Yards said. And if Montgomery's men try to force their way in? Nathan has already spoken with the Denver police, Sarah Bailey interjected from where she stood by the door. They've agreed to maintain a presence at the hotel. No one will be removing any guest against their will. As Walsh and Sarah discussed further details, Yards noticed Olivia's hands trembling slightly in her lap. He covered them with his own, providing silent support. Are you all right? He asked quietly. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed her fear. Just preparing myself. Victor will be furious. When he's angry, he's unpredictable, dangerous. He won't harm you, Yards promised. Not again. Never again. She squeezed his hand gratefully. I believe you. The night passed slowly, with Yards sleeping fitfully in Olivia's hotel suite while she remained hidden in the back room of Sarah's shop. At first light, he rose, washed, and dressed with particular care, selecting his best clothes for the confrontation to come. Nathan Bailey joined him for an early breakfast in the hotel restaurant, providing updates on the situation. Montgomery arrived late last night, he reported in a low voice. Staying at the Grand Hotel across town, has 3 men with him besides Doyle and Jenkins, plus the Cimarron sheriff. A show of force, Yards observed grimly. Trying to intimidate us. Likely, Nathan agreed. But we have friends too. Judge Henderson has agreed to hear the case at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Mr. Walsh is confident. And Olivia, how is she this morning? Nervous but resolute, according to Sarah. She's helping with some simple sewing tasks to keep her mind occupied. Nathan studied his friend's face. You care for her deeply. Yards didn't bother denying it. I do, more than I thought possible after such a short time. Some connections don't need time, Nathan said with a small smile. Sarah and I knew within a week that we were meant for each other. Been happily married 23 years now. I envy you that certainty, Yards admitted, and that happiness. You could have it too, Nathan suggested. Once this business with Montgomery is settled, if it's settled in our favor, Yards cautioned, and if Olivia wants the same things I do. From what Sarah tells me, I believe she does. Nathan clapped his friend on the shoulder. Have faith, Yards. In justice, and in your feelings for each other. The hours passed with excruciating slowness until it was finally time to escort Olivia to the courthouse. Yards collected her from the shop, struck anew by her beauty and courage as she emerged dressed in a simple but elegant blue dress that Sarah had altered for her. You look lovely, he told her sincerely. Sarah's work, she replied with a nervous smile. She said I should appear respectable but not ostentatious. Good advice for facing a judge. He offered his arm. Ready? She took a deep breath before placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. As I'll ever be. A carriage was waiting to transport them the short distance to the courthouse, where Jeremy Walsh met them on the steps. Judge Henderson is ready for us, he informed them. Montgomery and his party are already inside. Olivia's grip on Yard's arm tightened almost painfully, but her expression remained composed as they entered the building and were led to a large office rather than a formal courtroom. Judge Henderson, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and keen eyes, sat behind a massive desk. To one side of the room stood Victor Montgomery with the Cimarron sheriff and two of his men. Yards felt Olivia falter slightly beside him when she saw her husband, but she quickly regained her composure. Montgomery's eyes narrowed with undisguised fury as they entered. Your Honor, Walsh began formally, thank you for agreeing to hear this matter. I represent Mrs. Olivia Montgomery, who seeks your protection from her husband on grounds of extreme cruelty. A heavy-set man in an expensive suit stepped forward from Montgomery's group. Charles Barton, Your Honor, representing Mr. Victor Montgomery. This proceeding is unnecessary and, frankly, inappropriate. Mrs. Montgomery is legally bound to her husband. The Cimarron sheriff has papers authorizing her return to New Mexico territory. Judge Henderson raised a hand, silencing both lawyers. I'm aware of the legal complexities here, gentlemen, but before we address those, I wish to hear from Mrs. Montgomery herself. He turned his penetrating gaze to Olivia. Madam, please approach and tell me in your own words why you have fled your husband's home. Olivia moved forward, her back straight, her hands clasped before her to hide their trembling. Your Honor, I left because I feared for my life. My husband's treatment grew increasingly violent over the 3 years of our marriage. The night I fled, he had tied me to a post in the center of town, in the rain, as punishment for speaking to another man at the general store. Montgomery made a dismissive sound. Exaggeration and lies, Your Honor. My wife has always had a flair for the dramatic. You will have your turn to speak, sir, the judge rebuked him firmly. Mrs. Montgomery, continue. Olivia described the escalating pattern of abuse, the isolation Montgomery had forced upon her, and finally, the public humiliation of being bound to the post. Had Mr. Ingram not cut me free, I believe I would have remained there all night. In my weakened condition, I might not have survived. The judge listened attentively, occasionally making notes. When she finished, he asked, Are there witnesses to these events, particularly to the incident with the post? Dr. Miller of Cimarron treated me that night, Olivia replied, and his wife assisted. The entire town saw me bound there, though most chose to look away. Convenient that these witnesses are hundreds of miles away, Montgomery's lawyer interjected. Indeed, the judge agreed, though written testimony could be obtained. He turned to Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery, what is your response to these allegations? Victor Montgomery stepped forward, the picture of offended dignity in his expensive suit and carefully groomed appearance. Your Honor, my wife suffers from nervous disorders that cause her to imagine mistreatment where none exists. I have always provided generously for her, despite her increasingly erratic behavior. The incident she describes was a regrettable but necessary measure to prevent her from harming herself during one of her spells. Yards clenched his fists at the blatant lies but remained silent, knowing an outburst would only hurt their case. You claim you tied your wife to a post for her own protection? The judge asked skeptically. Temporarily, yes, Montgomery replied smoothly. I had sent for the doctor and needed to ensure she remained safe until he arrived. Unfortunately, this drifter, he gestured contemptuously toward Yards, interfered and abducted her before proper medical care could be provided. That's not true, Olivia protested. Victor, how can you stand there and you see her agitation, Your Honor? Montgomery interrupted. This is precisely the sort of episode I've had to manage throughout our marriage. Her mother suffered from similar delusions before her death. Judge Henderson's expression remained neutral. Sheriff Dawson, he addressed the Cimarron lawman, did you witness any of these events? The sheriff, a weathered man in his 50s, shifted uncomfortably. No, Your Honor. I was informed after the fact, but Mr. Montgomery is a respected citizen of our county. His word carries considerable weight. I see. The judge turned back to Olivia. Mrs. Montgomery, do you have any evidence beyond your testimony to support your claims of mistreatment? Walsh stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may, Mrs. Montgomery bears scars from previous injuries inflicted by her husband. A medical examination would confirm this. Injuries she likely sustained during her episodes of self-harm, Montgomery's lawyer countered. The debate continued for nearly an hour, with both sides presenting arguments and counter-arguments. Throughout, Yards watched Olivia maintain her composure despite Montgomery's increasingly bold lies about her mental state and behavior. Finally, Judge Henderson held up a hand. I've heard enough for now. This is clearly a complex situation that cannot be resolved in a single hearing. He looked at Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery, while your legal right to reclaim your wife is established under New Mexico Territory law, I am concerned by the allegations raised here today. Until I can determine their validity, I am issuing a temporary order of protection, preventing you from approaching or removing Mrs. Montgomery from Denver. This is outrageous, Montgomery exploded, his cultivated facade cracking. She is my wife, my property. And there, sir, is the problem with your position, the judge replied sternly. No human being is property in this country, not since the 13th Amendment. While marriage grants certain legal rights, it does not convert one spouse into the chattel of another. Montgomery's face flushed with anger. You have no jurisdiction over a marriage performed in New Mexico Territory. I have jurisdiction over the safety of all persons within Colorado Territory, Henderson corrected him. The protection order stands for 30 days, during which time I will send inquiries to Cimarron regarding the allegations made here today. He turned to Olivia. Mrs. Montgomery, you will remain in Denver under this court's protection. Mr. Walsh will provide details regarding your obligations during this period. With a sharp rap of his gavel on the desk, he concluded the hearing. Montgomery stormed out, followed by his lawyer and men, but not before fixing Yards with a look of pure hatred. This isn't over, he hissed as he passed. Not by a long shot. Once they had departed, Judge Henderson addressed Olivia more gently. Mrs. Montgomery, I must caution you that the protection order is temporary. If evidence supporting your claims cannot be obtained, I may have no choice but to recognize your husband's legal rights. I understand, Your Honor, she replied. Thank you for hearing me today. Outside the courthouse, Walsh briefed them on next steps. I'll send telegrams to Cimarron immediately, seeking written statements from Dr. Miller and others who might corroborate your account. In the meantime, you should remain cautious. The protection order prevents Montgomery from approaching you legally, but men like him don't always respect legal barriers, Yards finished grimly. We'll be careful. They returned to the Bailey house, where Nathan and Sarah were anxiously awaiting news. Both were relieved to hear of the temporary victory, but agreed with Walsh's caution. You shouldn't stay in the hotel, Nathan advised. Montgomery knows you're here. It would be too easy for him or his men to cause trouble. "I've considered that," Walsh said. "There's a boarding house for women on Cherry Creek, run by the Sisters of Mercy. It would be a safe place for Mrs. Montgomery until this matter is resolved." Olivia looked uncertainly at Yards. "What do you think?" "It sounds sensible," he admitted, though the thought of being separated from her troubled him. "Your safety is the priority." She nodded, recognizing the wisdom of the plan despite her obvious reluctance. "When should I go?" "Tonight would be best," Walsh suggested. "I've already spoken with the sisters. They're expecting you and understand the situation." Arrangements were made quickly. Olivia would pack her few belongings and be escorted to the boarding house after dark, when there was less chance of being observed. Yards would remain at the Bailey house, maintaining the appearance that Olivia was still staying there to draw attention away from her actual location. As evening approached, Yards found a moment alone with Olivia in Sarah's workroom. "I don't like being separated from you," he admitted, taking her hands in his. "Nor I from you," she replied softly, "but it's only temporary, until we know what Victor will do next." "I'll visit you as often as the sisters allow," he promised, "and Walsh seems optimistic about getting statements from Cimarron." She nodded, though worry still clouded her eyes. "Victor won't give up easily. When he wants something, he can be relentless. So can I," Yards assured her. "Especially when it's something worth fighting for." Her expression softened at that. "Yards, when this is over, whatever the outcome, I want you to know that meeting you has given me hope again, hope for a life I'd thought was impossible." He raised a hand to cup her cheek gently. "Olivia, when I told you no more chains, I meant every kind of bondage, physical, legal, emotional. I want to see you truly free, and then, if you choose me." He trailed off, emotion making it difficult to continue. "I already have," she whispered, leaning forward to press her lips to his. This kiss was different from their first, still gentle, but with an underlying passion that spoke of deeper feelings and future possibilities. When they finally parted, both were breathing faster, and Yards felt a sense of certainty he hadn't experienced in years. "I'll keep you safe," he vowed. "Whatever it takes." Later that night, Olivia was safely installed at the Sisters of Mercy boarding house, a sturdy brick building in a respectable neighborhood. The Mother Superior, a practical woman who had seen many women in difficult situations, assured them of the house's security and discretion. "No man enters these doors without my permission," she stated firmly. "And I rarely give it. Mrs. Montgomery will be safe here." Yards returned to the Bailey house feeling both relieved and uneasy. The temporary separation was necessary, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Montgomery was not a man to be deterred by legal documents or respectable nuns. His instincts proved correct the very next morning. He was having breakfast in the hotel restaurant when Nathan appeared at his table, his expression grave. "Montgomery's gone," he reported in a low voice. "Checked out of the Grand Hotel at dawn, took all his men with him." Yards frowned. "That's unexpected and concerning." "The Denver police captain thinks he's heading back to New Mexico," Nathan continued, "but I'm not so sure. It seems too easy." "Agreed," Yards said, pushing aside his half-eaten breakfast. "I should check on Olivia." He went directly to the boarding house, where the Mother Superior informed him that all was well. "Mrs. Montgomery is helping with the mending this morning," she said. "She's quite skilled with a needle." "May I see her?" The nun hesitated. "It's not usually permitted during work hours. But given the circumstances, wait in the parlor. I'll send her to you briefly." Olivia appeared a few minutes later, looking more rested than she had in days. The simple gray dress she wore did nothing to diminish her beauty, and Yards felt his heart lighten at the sight of her. "You look well," he said, taking her hands briefly before remembering where they were and stepping back respectfully. She smiled. I slept through the night for the first time in, I can't remember how long, no nightmares. He shared the news of Montgomery's departure, watching her face carefully for her reaction. He's gone, she asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Just like that, apparently. But it seems too simple. She nodded, her initial relief fading. Victor doesn't give up, not ever. If he's left Denver, it might mean he's planning something else, Yards finished for her. Something we haven't anticipated. Mother Superior, who had been standing discreetly nearby, approached. If I may offer an observation, men like your husband, Mrs. Montgomery, men who view their wives as possessions often react poorly to public challenge. The judge's ruling yesterday was a blow to his pride as much as to his legal case. Meaning, Yards prompted. Meaning he might seek to re-establish his authority in ways outside the law, the nun replied gravely. You should be exceptionally cautious. Yards nodded, his concern deepening. I'll speak with Walsh, see if he can learn more about Montgomery's movements. And I'll check with the telegraph office, see if any messages have come from Cimarron. Please be careful, Olivia urged. If Victor has truly left, I will, he promised. And you stay within these walls until we know more. He departed with reluctance, his mind racing through possibilities, none of them reassuring. If Montgomery had truly left Denver, it could mean he was accepting defeat, but everything Yards had learned about the man suggested otherwise. At the telegraph office, he found a message waiting from Dr. Miller in Cimarron. The doctor had sent a detailed statement documenting Olivia's injuries over the years, explicitly attributing them to Montgomery's abuse. It was exactly the evidence they needed to strengthen their case before Judge Henderson. Encouraged by this development, Yards took the message to Walsh's office, only to find the lawyer looking troubled. I've received disturbing news, Walsh said after reading the telegraph. The Cimarron sheriff left Denver this morning, but Montgomery and his men remained behind. They were seen purchasing supplies at a general store on the outskirts of town. What kind of supplies? Yards asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Rope, kerosene, weapons. Walsh's expression was grim, not the actions of a man preparing to return home peacefully. Yards felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He's planning something against Olivia, or against you, Walsh suggested. You're the one who took her in his mind, the one who challenged his authority. Either way, we need to be prepared. Yards paced the small office. The boarding house is secure, but I should be closer, in case Montgomery makes a move. I've already spoken with Mother Superior, Walsh assured him. She's agreed to allow you to stay in the caretaker's cottage on the grounds. It's small, but it will keep you near in case of trouble. Yards nodded gratefully. When? Tonight. I'll have a carriage bring your things from the Bailey house after dark. Walsh hesitated. Yards, you should know Montgomery has a reputation for vindictiveness. If he can't have Olivia back, he might decide no one can have her. I'm aware, Yards replied grimly, which is why I won't let him anywhere near her. That evening, as arranged, Yards moved into the tiny caretaker's cottage on the grounds of the boarding house. From its window, he could see the back entrance to the main building, while remaining hidden from the street. The sisters had been surprisingly accommodating, bending their strict rules given the potential danger to Olivia. For 3 days, there was no sign of Montgomery or his men. Yards maintained his vigil, visiting Olivia briefly each day under Mother Superior's watchful eye. Each time, he found her more settled, more herself, as if each day away from her husband's influence was restoring a piece of her spirit that had been crushed under his cruelty. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Walsh arrived at the boarding house with news. "Judge Henderson has reviewed Dr. Miller's statement and found it compelling," he reported as they sat in the parlor. "He's inclined to extend the protection order indefinitely, which would effectively grant Mrs. Montgomery the legal separation we sought." "That's wonderful news," Olivia said, relief evident in her voice. "When will it be official?" "There's a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. You'll need to attend, but it should be brief. A formality, really, given the evidence we now have." Yards, who had been standing near the window, spoke up. "And Montgomery, any word on his whereabouts?" Walsh shook his head. "Nothing definite. His men have been seen around town, but Montgomery himself has kept a low profile." "Which makes me all the more uneasy," Yards admitted. "He's planning something. I can feel it." "The Denver police will provide an escort to and from the courthouse tomorrow," Walsh assured them. "Every precaution will be taken." Later, after the lawyer had departed, Yards walked with Olivia in the boarding house garden, one of the few opportunities they had for relatively private conversation. The autumn air was crisp, leaves turning golden on the trees that shaded the well-kept paths. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, watching her profile as she gazed at a late-blooming rosebush. "Yes," she admitted, "but hopeful too, if the judge grants the separation." She looked up at him, vulnerability and strength mingling in her expression. "It would mean a future, Yards. A real future, free from Victor's control." "A future for us?" he asked quietly. "If that's what you want." She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. "It is, more than anything." He squeezed her hand gently. "When this is over, I was thinking we might travel west. To California, perhaps, or Oregon, somewhere with mild winters and plenty of opportunity." "I'd like that," she said, smiling. "I've never seen the ocean." "It's a sight to behold," he told her. "Almost as beautiful as you." She blushed at the compliment, still unused to such open admiration after years of criticism and cruelty. "What would we do there? In California?" "Whatever we choose," he said simply. "I have some savings, enough to buy a small piece of land perhaps. Or invest in a business in one of the growing towns." He looked down at their joined hands. "I'm tired of drifting, Olivia, ready to put down roots, with you if you'll have me." "Are you proposing Yards Ingram?" she asked, her voice soft but teasing. "Not officially, not yet," he smiled. "That will come when you're truly free, when there can be no question about your choice being your own." Her eyes shone with emotion. "You continue to surprise me. Most men wouldn't wait." "I'm not most men," he replied simply. "And what we're building deserves the proper foundation. No shadows. No doubts." She stood on tiptoe, pressing a soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you for understanding, for everything." The moment was interrupted by the dinner bell ringing from the main house. Reluctantly, they parted. Yards escorting Olivia back to the building before returning to his cottage to prepare for the night ahead. His unease grew as darkness fell. Something about the stillness of the evening disturbed him. It was too quiet, too peaceful given the threat that Montgomery represented. Yards checked and rechecked his revolver, positioned a chair by the window, and settled in for another night of watchful waiting. Around midnight, his vigilance was rewarded. A shadow moved along the wall separating the boarding house grounds from the neighboring property. Then another. Men, moving stealthily, clearly trying to avoid detection. Yards slipped out of the cottage, staying in the deeper shadows as he moved to intercept the intruders. There were 3 of them, he realized, and they were headed for the back entrance of the main building. Montgomery's men. Coming for Olivia. Yards drew his revolver but hesitated to fire. A gunshot would cause panic in the house full of women, potentially creating more danger. Instead, he moved swiftly to place himself between the men and the door they were approaching. "That's far enough," he said quietly but firmly, his gun leveled at the lead figure. The men froze, then spread out slightly, trying to surround him. In the dim light from a quarter moon, Yards recognized Doyle among them. "Should have minded your own business, Ingram," Doyle growled, his own weapon now drawn. "Mr. Montgomery wants his wife back. Mrs. Montgomery isn't going anywhere," Yards replied evenly, "except to court tomorrow where she'll be legally freed from your employer." One of the other men laughed softly. "That's why we're here. Make sure that don't happen." Yards' grip tightened on his revolver, 3 against 1. "Not very sporting." "We ain't here for sport," Doyle said. "Just following orders. Montgomery says bring his wife, or if we can't, make sure no one else gets her either." The implication chilled Yards to the bone. They weren't just here to abduct Olivia, they were prepared to kill her if they couldn't take her. "Last chance to walk away," Yards warned them. "The Denver police know all about Montgomery's threats. If anything happens to Mrs. Montgomery, they'll hunt you down." The men exchanged glances, perhaps considering his words. Then Doyle's expression hardened. "Too late for warnings, Ingram. Mr. Montgomery pays well for loyalty." What happened next unfolded with the speed and chaos of most violent confrontations. Doyle and one of his companions fired almost simultaneously, their shots going wide as Yards dove for cover behind a stone bench. He returned fire, catching one man in the shoulder, sending him stumbling backward with a cry of pain. Lights were coming on in the boarding house now, alarmed voices calling out from within. Yards knew he had to end this quickly, before any of the women inside were endangered. He rolled to a new position, firing again and catching Doyle in the leg. The foreman fell, cursing viciously. The third man, seeing his companions wounded, turned to flee only to run directly into 2 Denver policemen who had been patrolling nearby and heard the gunshots. "Drop your weapon," one officer shouted, his revolver trained on the would-be kidnapper. Within minutes, all 3 of Montgomery's men were disarmed and in custody. Yards explained the situation to the officers, who had indeed been warned about potential trouble at the boarding house. "Where's Montgomery himself?" one policeman asked as they secured the prisoners. "Don't know," Doyle grunted, clutching his bleeding leg. "He gave us our orders and left, said he had other business to attend to." Yards felt a surge of unease. If Montgomery wasn't with his men, he's creating a diversion, he realized aloud. These 3 were meant to draw attention here while Montgomery himself. His blood ran cold as the truth hit him. "The hotel. He thinks Olivia is still at the Bailey house." One of the officers nodded grimly. "We'll send men there immediately." But Yards was already running, fear giving wings to his feet. If Montgomery had gone to the Bailey house believing Olivia was there, Nathan and Sarah could be in danger. And if he discovered he'd been deceived. He reached the hotel in record time, his lungs burning from the exertion. From half a block away, he could see that something was wrong. A crowd had gathered outside, and smoke was visible rising from one of the upper windows, the window of what had been Olivia's suite. Pushing through the onlookers, Yards found Nathan directing a bucket brigade while Sarah tended to a guest who appeared to have suffered smoke inhalation. "What happened?" Yards demanded, grabbing his friend's arm. Nathan's face was grim, streaked with soot. "Montgomery came looking for Olivia. When we said she wasn't here, he went mad, set fire to her room before we could stop him." "Is everyone all right?" "Yes, thank God. We got all the guests out safely. The fire's contained to that one suite." Nathan's expression darkened further, but Montgomery got away in the confusion. "And he was ranting," Yards said if he couldn't have Olivia, no one would. Yards' mind raced. "The boarding house is secure. Police are there now after stopping an abduction attempt, but Montgomery himself is still out there. And now he knows Olivia isn't here, Nathan said grimly. He'll be looking for her. Yards nodded. I need to get back to her, make sure she's protected until Montgomery is found. Go, Nathan urged. We can handle things here. Sarah's brother is with the Denver police. I'll send word about Montgomery through him. Yards raced back to the boarding house, finding it now brightly lit and surrounded by policemen. Mother Superior met him at the door, her usually stern face etched with concern. Mrs. Montgomery is safe, she assured him before he could ask. Shaken, but unharmed. She's in the chapel with Sister Agnes. Thank you, Yards said, relief flooding through him. Montgomery himself is still at large. He set fire to the Bailey house thinking Olivia was there. The nun crossed herself. Is anyone hurt? No, thankfully, but it shows how desperate he's become. Yards looked past her toward the interior of the house. I need to see Olivia. Warn her, Mother Superior nodded. Follow me. She led him to a small chapel at the rear of the building where Olivia knelt in prayer, a younger nun at her side. When she saw Yards, she rose quickly, rushing to him. You're all right, she breathed, taking his hands. I heard the shots. They said you confronted Montgomery's men. I'm fine, he assured her. But Montgomery himself is still free. He went to the Bailey house, set fire to your room when he learned you weren't there. Her face paled. Nathan and Sarah. They're safe. Everyone got out. He squeezed her hands gently, but Montgomery is becoming more dangerous, more unpredictable. The hearing tomorrow, she said, understanding dawning. He's trying to prevent it from happening. Yes, and we can't let him succeed. Yards turned to Mother Superior. Is there somewhere more secure we could move Mrs. Montgomery for the night? Somewhere less obvious than her usual room? The nun considered this. The root cellar, perhaps. It's not comfortable, but it's stone-walled and has only one entrance, which can be guarded. It will do, Olivia said before Yards could object to the accommodations. I've endured far worse than a night in a cellar. Arrangements were quickly made. The root cellar was hastily prepared with blankets and a lamp, and Olivia was installed there with provisions for the night. 2 policemen remained on guard outside the boarding house, while Yards positioned himself at the cellar's entrance, determined that no harm would come to her. It was a long night, punctuated by reports from police patrols searching for Montgomery. By dawn, there was still no sign of him, and Yards found himself torn between hope that the danger had passed and fear of what the man might be planning. As morning light filtered through the boarding house windows, preparations began for transporting Olivia safely to the courthouse. Walsh arrived early, bringing news that Judge Henderson was aware of the previous night's events and had ordered additional security for the hearing. The police will provide an armed escort, the lawyer explained as they gathered in the boarding house parlor. And the courthouse itself will be secured. Olivia, despite her night in the cellar, looked remarkably composed in a conservative gray dress borrowed from one of the sisters. And after the hearing, she asked, assuming the judge grants the separation, I've arranged passage for you on the afternoon stage to Cheyenne, Walsh replied. From there, you can take the Union Pacific wherever you wish to go. Denver may not be safe for you until Montgomery is apprehended. She glanced at Yards, a question in her eyes. We hadn't discussed leaving so soon. Your safety comes first, he said, though the thought of such hasty departure troubled him. I can follow in a day or two, once things are settled here. She nodded, accepting the necessity though clearly unhappy with the separation it would entail. Then let's proceed with the hearing. The sooner it's done, the sooner we can put this behind us. The journey to the courthouse proceeded without incident. 4 policemen surrounded the carriage carrying Olivia, Yards, and Walsh, while others scouted ahead to ensure the route was clear. At the courthouse itself, more officers were stationed at every entrance. Judge Henderson received them in his chambers rather than the more public courtroom, an additional precaution given the circumstances. He reviewed Dr. Miller's statement and the police reports from the previous night's incidents with grave attention. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said finally, looking up from the documents, "I find the evidence of your husband's cruelty compelling and consistent. Furthermore, his actions since arriving in Denver attempting abduction, arson, potentially worse speak to a dangerous instability that cannot be ignored." Olivia sat straighter, hope lighting her features. "Does that mean?" "It means I am granting your petition for legal separation on grounds of extreme cruelty," the judge confirmed. "Mr. Montgomery will be legally barred from approaching you, corresponding with you, or attempting to force your return to his home. He will also be required to provide reasonable financial support to be determined in a subsequent hearing." Relief washed over Olivia's face. "Thank you, Your Honor, thank you." "Don't thank me, Mrs. Montgomery. Thank the law, which, despite its imperfections, exists to protect all citizens, even wives, from their husbands when necessary." The judge signed several documents before handing them to Walsh. "These are your copies of the separation order. I suggest you carry them with you at all times." Walsh accepted the papers with a satisfied nod. "And the matter of Montgomery's criminal behavior last night. Warrants have been issued for his arrest on charges of arson, attempted kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit bodily harm," Henderson replied. "The Denver police are searching for him as we speak." They concluded the business quickly, mindful of the need to get Olivia safely to the stagecoach depot. As they left the judge's chambers, Yards felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Olivia was legally protected now, and soon she would be physically beyond Montgomery's reach as well. But as they emerged into the courthouse corridor, Yards' instincts sensed danger. The hallway was oddly empty, their police escort nowhere in sight. And at the far end, stepping around a corner, came Victor Montgomery himself. He looked disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled, his face haggard from lack of sleep. But it was the wild look in his eyes that sent a chill down Yards' spine, the look of a man who had crossed the line into dangerous obsession. "Olivia," Montgomery called, his voice echoing in the marble hallway. "There you are, my dear. Time to come home now." Yards moved immediately to place himself between Olivia and her husband. One hand reaching for his revolver only to remember it had been checked at the courthouse entrance, a standard precaution he now bitterly regretted. "It's over, Montgomery," he said firmly. "The judge has granted the separation. Olivia is legally free of you." Montgomery laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "Free? There's no such thing, not for her, not for any wife." He took a step closer, and Yards noticed with alarm that he was holding something partially concealed by his jacket. "She's mine until death parts us. Remember those vows, Olivia?" "Victor, please," Olivia said from behind Yards, her voice remarkably steady. "It's finished. Let me go. Let us both move on with our lives." "Move on?" Montgomery's expression darkened further. "With him, this drifter who stole what was mine." He withdrew his hand from his jacket, revealing a small revolver. "No, my dear, if I can't have you, no one will," Walsh gasped, backing away. "Montgomery, think about what you're doing. The building is full of law enforcement, who I've very carefully avoided," Montgomery interrupted, raising the gun. "Just as I avoided the police searching for me all night. You'd be surprised how easy it is to hide in plain sight when you have enough money." Yards calculated their options rapidly. The nearest exit was behind them, but too far to reach before Montgomery could fire. No weapons, no cover, no immediate help visible. Only one choice remained: direct confrontation. "You won't hurt her," Yards stated, his voice deadly calm as he began to slowly advance on Montgomery. "Not again. Not ever." Montgomery's gun shifted to target Yards directly. "Stop right there, Ingram. I'll kill you first, then her." "It makes no difference to me now." "Victor, don't!" Olivia cried, moving as if to follow Yards. "Stay back," Yards ordered without taking his eyes off Montgomery. "Walsh, get her out of here." The lawyer hesitated only briefly before grabbing Olivia's arm, trying to pull her toward the side corridor. She resisted at first, then yielded when Yards glanced back at her, his expression pleading for her to save herself. Montgomery snarled at their movement, the gun wavering between Yards and Olivia's retreating form. That moment of indecision was all Yards needed. He lunged forward, covering the remaining distance between them with surprising speed. Montgomery fired, the shot going wide as Yards crashed into him, driving him backward against the wall. The gun discharged again, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling as they struggled for control of the weapon. Montgomery was stronger than his refined appearance suggested and fueled by a madman's desperation. He brought a knee up sharply, catching Yards in the stomach and momentarily loosening his grip. The gun swung toward Yards' face. In that critical instant, another shot rang out, not from Montgomery's weapon, but from behind Yards. Montgomery's eyes widened in shock, his grip on the revolver slackening as a red stain blossomed on his chest. He slid down the wall, staring past Yards in disbelief. "Olivia!" Yards turned to see Olivia standing several yards away, a small derringer clutched in her trembling hand. Walsh was beside her, his face ashen. "No more chains," she said softly, the weapon dropping from her fingers to clatter on the marble floor. "Not for me, not for anyone." The next hours passed in a blur of police statements, medical examinations, and legal consultations. Montgomery was pronounced dead at the scene, the bullet from Olivia's concealed derringer having struck with remarkable accuracy for someone with no firearms training. The investigation was swift and conclusive. Given the separation order just granted, Montgomery's arson the previous night, the attempted abduction of Olivia, and his direct threats witnessed by Walsh and Yards, the shooting was deemed justifiable self-defense. No charges would be filed against Olivia. "Where did you get the derringer?" Yards asked quietly as they sat in Walsh's office later that day, waiting for final papers to be prepared. "Mother Superior gave it to me this morning," Olivia replied, still seeming somewhat dazed by the day's events. "Said many of the women who come to them are fleeing dangerous situations. The sisters believe in prayer, but also in practical protection." Yards shook his head, amazed. "Remind me never to underestimate nuns again." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "She made me promise only to use it as a last resort, to preserve life, not take it." The smile faded. "I broke that promise. You preserved your life and mine." He took her hand gently. "You did what you had to do, Olivia. No one blames you for that." She nodded slowly. "I know, and yet." "I took a life today. Victor's life. For all his cruelty, I never wanted that." "Of course you didn't. It's why you ran instead of confronting him, why you sought legal protection rather than revenge." Yards squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Your compassion, even for someone who hurt you so deeply, is one of the many reasons I love you." She looked up, startled by his open declaration. "Yards, I know the timing is terrible," he said with a rueful smile, "but after today, life seems too precious, too uncertain to waste time hiding how I feel. I love you, Olivia Montgomery. Have almost from the moment I cut you free from that post." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. "And I love you." Through all of this, you've been my strength, my safe harbor, the man who showed me what real kindness looks like." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "When you're ready, truly ready, I want to build a life with you, wherever you want to go, whatever you want to do. Partners, equals." "Always. I'd like that," she whispered. "Very much." Walsh returned then, carrying several official-looking documents. "Everything's in order," he announced. "Mrs. Montgomery, you are legally separated from your late husband's estate. Given the circumstances of his death, you are entitled to inherit as his widow, subject to any prior arrangements in his will." Olivia shook her head. "I want nothing of his, nothing at all." "I understand the sentiment," Walsh said gently, "but consider carefully. You might use those resources to help others in situations similar to yours, women with few options, trapped in cruel marriages." She considered this, a thoughtful expression replacing her earlier distress. "That feels right. A way to create something positive from all this pain." "I think it's a wonderful idea," Yards encouraged her. "A legacy of hope rather than hurt." Walsh smiled approvingly. "I can help arrange it, a foundation perhaps in your name." "Not my name," Olivia decided. "Something more meaningful, the Freedom Foundation maybe. For women seeking their own path." They discussed details for some time, the practical matters of establishing such an organization helping to ground Olivia after the emotional trauma of the day. By the time they concluded their business with Walsh, the afternoon stage to Cheyenne had long since departed. "You could stay another night at the boarding house," Walsh suggested. "Or—" he glanced between them meaningfully. "Other arrangements could be made, considering the circumstances." Yards looked to Olivia, leaving the decision entirely to her. "Whatever you prefer, there's no rush now," she thought for a moment. "I'd like to leave Denver," she said finally, "but not on the stage, not running away." She turned to Yards. "You mentioned California, the ocean, could we? Would you take me there?" "Together," he smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "Nothing would make me happier." "Then it's settled," Walsh said, rising to shake their hands. "I'll handle the legal matters here and correspond with you regarding the foundation. You two focus on your future." They departed Denver 3 days later, after Olivia had properly thanked the Sisters of Mercy and the Baileys for their help and kindness. They traveled by train when possible, by stagecoach when necessary, and occasionally on horseback, through particularly beautiful stretches of country that Yards wanted Olivia to experience fully. They were married in a small church in Nevada, with mountains visible through the windows and wildflowers decorating the simple altar. Yards wore the only suit he owned, and Olivia a dress of pale blue that made her eyes shine like sapphires. Their vows were traditional, but with one significant addition: a promise of freedom within their love, of chains forever broken. When they finally reached the California coast, it was sunset. They stood together on a cliff overlooking the vast Pacific, golden light turning the waves to molten fire as they crashed against the shore below. "It's more beautiful than I imagined," Olivia breathed, her hand secure in her husband's. "Like the world goes on forever." "It does, in a way," Yards replied, watching her face as she took in the magnificent vista. "So many possibilities, so many paths we could take." She turned to him, her expression serene in a way he had never seen before. The shadows that had haunted her eyes since Cimarron were gone, replaced by quiet joy and confidence. "As long as we take them together." He drew her into his arms, kissing her gently as the sun sank below the horizon. "Together," he agreed, "always together and always free." As darkness fell, they remained on the cliff, planning their future under stars that seemed to promise endless possibilities. A small farm, perhaps, with room for horses. Children someday, when they were ready. regular correspondence with the Freedom Foundation, which was already helping women escape situations like the one Olivia had endured. It wasn't the life either of them had envisioned years ago. It was better, richer, more authentic. "No more chains," Yards murmured against her hair as they finally turned to walk back to the small coastal town where they had taken rooms. "Just love, just love," Olivia echoed, her smile as bright as the stars above them. "And that's all we need."